all here to talk about, what's going on, what's been happening over the past handful of weeks, and really where do we go from here? What are the things that are shifting, and what are the ways that we need to all sort of come together as an industry and move forward? Quickly, I want to introduce everyone as well. So you are here for tourism, but also we run a series of these different events called CX Challenges. Really, we're focused on how do we understand the motivations of customers and employees, and look at how do we create experiences for customers and employees that build relationships and create innovation and move organizations forward. Coming out of today's conversation, we wanted to find ways to not only continue with additional conversations, but how do we also provide something that's actionable and give you a voice to be able to continue to work through some of the things that we talk about today. So we will be doing a workshop on June 24th that is all about how do you kind of use design thinking and service design methods to be able to elevate the visitor experience of your tourism website. So whether that's a tourism organization, a DMO, or if you're just a business that happens to work within this ecosystem, then how do you try and create a more human-centered or visitor-centered experience with what you're putting forward. We also have another webinar, another free webinar on June 17th, so that is in 2 weeks, on how organizations become adaptive and resilient in a time of crisis. And moving us forward, I also really want to say thank you to our sponsors. So we have 3 sponsors for our event today. The first one is PH1. So I haven't actually introduced myself. I am Brittany Hobbs. I am the head of research with PH1. I am based in Vancouver, BC. So thank you to everybody coming from all over the world. This is really exciting for us. We're the organizing sponsor for these events, and we are really focused on doing things like CX audits and strategies and finding ways to inform organizations' work with who their customers are, what they need, what they want, and really creating that experience and journey for them. We also are sponsored today by Qualtrics, which is an experience management software. They also happen to be creating and putting out a number of tools that are available for free right now to organizations of all sizes to help you understand what your employees' sort of fears and experiences are right now, what their sense is about returning back to work in this sort of environment, as well as things like your customer sentiment, and a number of different types of products. So you can kind of see on the screen here that they've got a whole suite of products that they're creating to really help you with that. We'll also be sharing some of that the link to that information after the event if you would like it. And we also are being sponsored today by Major Tom, which is a digital agency, but they are kind of the next iteration of the digital marketing agency. And they've been working with clients for over 20 years now. They really specialize in creating digital experiences and creating, bringing traffic to those experiences and working with some of the biggest niche brands. And in this time, they're also really focused on how do you create digital products that help restaurants and tourism and hospitality industry really get back on their feet in a smart and digitally forward way. So really, why are we here today? A big part of this conversation is about, what are visitors going to expect as they begin to start traveling again? So it's no secret that travel is, essentially halted. We were all told to stay home. We were told to really, stay in our own spaces and not travel. So what is that going to mean for us? So what I want to do is to kick us off is I've got a poll, and I'd really like to know from all of you is if we were to give you a free vacation to insert awesome city name, whatever that dream city is for you, for any time this year, when would you book it for? Is it this summer, this fall? Would it be for the year-end holidays? Or are you not even thinking about traveling at all until at least next year or until there's a vaccine? So maybe we'll see. We've got some people responding right now. Yeah, I mean, it's really like, what are people going to be expecting? What is this new experience that will need to be created for those people who are going to be traveling to begin with? And maybe I'll just give them another 20 seconds or so for people to respond. Okay, got your last couple of seconds here. Okay, so we don't have everyone voting, but that's okay. The consensus seems to be mostly not interested until 2021. This fall being a close front runner, but not super close. So 37% of you said not until 2021, and another 10% not interested until there's a vaccine. So as we can see, it seems pretty spread out about when people will feel comfortable traveling again. And so when we're looking at that 15% of the people this summer and 24% who said this fall, like, who are those, how do we identify who those people are who are going to be traveling early, and what is it that they need and what are they expecting when they're traveling? So today we have two panels. We've got a panel all about tourism, where we're going to be speaking with Alex Dagg from Airbnb, Oliver Martin from 2031 Consulting, and Sarah Kahn from, she's a travel writer who has written for so many different great publications like New York Times and Conde Nast Traveler. And so I'm going to now introduce our panel. Just close out some of these things that are hiding. So I'd like to welcome our panel. We've got Alex Dagg. She is the Director of Public Policy for Airbnb in Canada, as well as the US Northeast. She's a longtime labor leader. Alex is focused on strengthening the company's relationships with government officials, small business owners, civic leaders, and their hosts from every corner in Canada. At Airbnb, Alex focuses on developing relationships with governments at various levels across Canada to ensure everyday people can share their homes to make ends meet and pay the bills while contributing to their communities and supporting local businesses. And then we have Oliver Martin, who is a partner at 2031 Consulting, a destination development strategist with 18 plus years of experience working with leadership teams. Oliver is an expert in the design and quantitative research to identify innovations in destination and brand strategy. Over his career, Oliver has worked with over 50 tourism management organizations to develop sustainable growth plans and measure impact. And he is joining us very late or early, depending on how you look at it, from Berlin today. So thank you for making the time to come and join us at this time of day for you. And then we have Sarah Kahn, who is a freelance travel and food journalist and frequent contributor to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Conde Nast Traveler, Savoir, and many others. When she's not on assignment, she's usually holed up in New York, Mumbai, or Cape Town, or these days locked down in New York. So thank you so much to the three of you, and also thank you to our attendees today. Like we saw, you're joining us from all over the world, many of you at destinations, businesses, and institutions tirelessly working on how to safely and sustainably resume tourism. And so I'm going to ask our panelists to join us now. So if you just turn your videos on, that'd be great. And also, just to everyone who is attending, if at any time you want to ask a question, please do use the Q&A feature. If you use the chat feature, we'll also try and find it there, but the Q&A feature will be really helpful, and that way we can make sure that we're calling attention to your questions and answering them towards the end of each of the panels. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see all of us a little bit better. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining me. And so let's get to it. Let's have a great conversation. I'm really, really looking forward to this. So just to get started, Sarah, in April, actually, let me share my screen again. This way everyone can kind of see what I'm talking about. So Sarah, in April, you wrote an article called "The Era of Peak Travel is Over. COVID-19 changed the world's jet-setting ways in the blink of an eye. It could take years to return to normal." So we'll also share this with everybody so you can read this afterwards as well. And you end the article with a quote from Shobha Mohan, a hotel consortia owner, where they say, "People call it the Great Reset. It's creating awareness for a better kind of travel." So we're now 2 months later. What do you believe? Do you believe that the tourism industry is going to return to like a normal, or do you think it's going to shift towards a better kind of travel?
I do think it's going to shift. And first of all, hi, and thank you so much for having me. And I think first, just a little disclaimer, I do think the headline is a bit misleading from the story. Just, you got to get the clicks, I guess. But the idea isn't that it's over. It's that it's going to take a while to get back to where we were at in February 2020 levels. And, some people I spoke with predict it might take 5 years. And I do think it's going to take a while. And what we've come to perceive as normal is definitely not going to be happening for a while. And as far as how destinations and businesses respond to that, I think this is one of the cases where they're going to have to take the backseat and be fast on their feet and responsive and dynamic and see what it is that the travelers are comfortable with as we start easing in. And, we've already started seeing some restrictions and some travel start to gradually reopen, mostly domestic in different markets. But I think people are going to be keeping a close eye on what those travelers are interested in. And it is for a lot of people going to be more meaningful trips, taking advantage of their travel time and, not taking for granted what we kind of have come to take for granted in this fast travel kind of mindset that we've had. A lot of people will probably be going to more remote destinations, and people will really be craving human interaction, I think, after this long period of isolation. So I think once people get a sense, or once businesses get a sense of what it is that people want, they're just going to have to respond and be able to make a new normal based off of that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I think, it's sort of a funny term. Everyone likes to say the new normal, but it really is true in this case, I think. So the World Tourism Organization projected that 2020 international tourism numbers could fall by up to 80%. So Oliver, you're, in this consulting role, in your work consulting with destinations throughout the world, throughout this crisis, are your clients more focused on speeding up recovery or on understanding how to become more resilient?
It's the billion-dollar question, I think. We tend to have a lot of pressure in our industry from hyper-local tourism assets, usually the hotel industry, to fill immediately. And I don't think us as an industry will ever get over that dynamic, because it's the need to get people into the destination, spending money and starting to circulate those dollars. I think, without speaking for a majority of destinations, but the ones that we are working with, I think overwhelmingly they are focused on this immediate recovery. Just recently on Sunday, Destination Canada, the federal government made pretty big announcements that we're looking at, recovering the summer period. It's all about driving, hyper-local domestic tourism within Canada. I think that's pretty much been the commonality that we've seen across the board. Whether or not you're Guam in the Pacific, or Ireland, or Britain, or even U.S. destinations, it's this need to try and recover tourism immediately. We are working with the South African government, and I will say that they are very much looking at 2021 and beyond. I think it's a understanding that the way the consumer mindset has really adapted and changed, what Sarah was saying, has really resulted in them thinking that it will be almost impossible for them to recover this year. So start looking forward and trying to make some sort of systemic changes and to how to do things differently.
That's good. It's nice to hear that that some are looking forward, and so it sounds like it's kind of a mixed bag then of who's sort of just trying to recover at this point. So Alex, Airbnb transformed how people travel by making accommodations more accessible. And I think, it's no surprise that's been a huge part of what has led to the kind of influx of travel levels that we had seen up to this point. And it's been a really big part of how people travel now, like really opening up and making it more accessible for people to travel on all different kinds of budgets. But the success also means that Airbnb's success is connected to the entire industry's growth. Is Airbnb exploring ways of accelerating the recovery while also helping to make the industry more resilient?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wanted to kind of follow up also from what Sarah and Oliver have already said. I think our company, Airbnb, really figured out a way how to tap into this human desire to connect with people and to have unique, interesting human experiences. And that has not gone away. And people are going to search for that. And how do we do this in this new world? And our company's been hard hit, but we're really seeing some really interesting signs of optimistic signs through demand on our platform for a new way to travel, which is really travel we're seeing is going to be near, not far. We're seeing a big rise in people just traveling to the next town or wanting to travel to the next town. It's less than 80 kilometers from where they are now. And also really looking for unique, interesting stays, typically more rural than urban. So we've got, we monitor our search, people search, searches that they do on our platform, and cabins right now are number 2 in the US. Globally, they're in the top 10 and growing the fastest. We also have people really searching for unique stays, like wanting to stay in domes and yurts and tree houses and RVs. And really, it's a way of trying to look for a safe way to travel. We're seeing smaller groups, like it tends to be now just, 2 people looking to stay together in some kind of home away from home and close to where you are. And I think that's what we're going to see initially. We're really kind of interested in these new trends and looking to make sure we develop enough supply to meet this kind of new trend and new way of looking at experiencing your own backyard to a larger degree than what we've typically been doing.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it'll be interesting to see how that shifts the need or the capacity for tourism or hospitality within some of these smaller markets that maybe weren't seeing the numbers before.
I mean, we all know that travel generates billions of dollars of economic impact. And if we can spread some of that into smaller communities and not the sort of hotspots that people typically were doing, we think that's really good for recovery, for economic empowerment, for people sharing space in their homes or a second home. And so we think there's a lot of really good potential here.
Great.
So without saying that there's a positive in this, because we're still in the midst of peak COVID, but Alex, you're 100% right. This is an opportunity for us to do what we have wanted to do in destinations, which is disperse people beyond major gateways, to ensure that we're getting a more equitable share of tourism within communities. And we will start seeing this as we start moving to hyper-local tourism.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, I think that's going to bring up its own kind of questions around, the densification of some of those smaller cities. But I think, we're still early days in it, and I think there are some positives for sure that come out of that. So let's think then about, you mentioned that we're still peak COVID, we're still kind of in that space of not really knowing, right? And so let's, think looking ahead, into the summer, crystal balls here, borders will be opening up, travel booking will be increasing, hopefully, even if slowly, somewhat increasing, and businesses will be beginning to rehire. So, we're looking at the start of recovery, and I think a lot of cities have already started opening, and so it's not unrealistic to think, into the summer that could happen. So once international travel starts to open up, not just domestic, who do you think will be the first to travel? Like, how are they going to be deciding where to go and where to stay? Like, who do you think this first segment's going to be, and what will they need? Anybody feel ambitious? All right, Sarah, let's go.
Well, I think this is an interesting question because it's not going to be as simple as who wants to travel. It's going to be who can travel based on various restrictions that different countries are going to be implementing for their own, national interests. And so even, obviously there's going to be theories that millennials might be the most intrepid ones out there, and the older generation or parents of young children might be a bit more timid. But even if you decide, all right, I'm ready to go, you're going to be choosing where to go based on who's going to allow, me to travel without a mandatory quarantine. And some countries, at least that have already started opening, are only opening their borders to certain other countries within their travel bubbles, as we've been hearing a lot about lately, where Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are allowing open borders among them, Australia, New Zealand. And so there's going to be some countries that were especially hard hit, like the US, where I am, where we might just not be wanted for a while. We might just have to kind of make do with domestic travel, which fortunately there's a lot of that. And then, but once we kind of navigate which countries are going to be allowing us and what the rules and regulations and limitations are, I do think Airbnb, and a lot of the research that I did, people kept pointing to things like that. Personal homestays are definitely going to be a major factor for people who want to feel like they can control their environment and have some, like oversight over how it's cleaned, how often it's cleaned, and how safe you are from other people. So I do think that's going to be a major way people start looking to explore different places by, maybe avoiding hotels a bit, or at least the bigger kinds of hotels, and kind of trying to find their own personal stays there.
Yeah.
It's the kind of, sorry, Brittany. Yeah, that's the kind of research we're seeing too, is that, we're in a poll we did, 74% of people said that they would feel safer staying in a homestay like arrangement as opposed to a hotel. We're also introducing enhanced cleaning standards for all of our hosts, and things are going to change. And I think the community is going to be responsive to try to ensure that. Sorry, Oliver, I know you were going to weigh in.
No, you're right, Alex. Sorry, I just 2 points related to that. So my colleague Joe, based in New York, and my colleague Erica in Toronto, they're working on a project on a weekly basis, producing a dashboard for the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, and it takes a look at destinations and the conditions or the preconditions that they're setting up for tourism. And we've got a series of heat maps, and it's all publicly available information. So it looks at the 13 provinces and territories in Canada, the top 10 major outbound tourism destinations in the US, and the top 16 outbound destinations. And across the board, you're starting to see an opening of tourism, but it's a slow and methodical process. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that creates a little bit of confusion for consumers. We are seeing, destinations like Greece and Italy. Iceland has mentioned that they're opening up. Consumers right now, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, are in that stage where school is starting to rise, and they're looking for that summer period. So we will, by default, see this hyper-local domestic-based tourism. It's easy, they understand it, there's less risk factor associated with it. So that consumer is very much, the VFR, visiting friends and relatives consumer. It's the vital meetings sector. So businesses that have, pushed back business tourism for this last, 8 to 12 weeks, and they have to go and do that business tourism. And I think the third aspect of that is, someone that Sarah spoke to, it's that intrepid traveler. It's that traveler that has the means to travel, has had that pent up demand, and is looking to try and, get out of Dodge. And we'll start seeing that type of segment moving forward. There's also our friends at Skift. We do a bunch of work with Skift out of New York. They've got reopening.travel. And again, it's an awesome resource for tourism businesses as well as destinations to really understand what are the types of tourism businesses that are opening and when, and also when are the destinations that are opening.
Great.
Yeah, we're also seeing, a rise in people really looking for personal places to go to celebrate personal milestones, right? That they've missed. Yeah, they've missed, right? Probably where they can drive to, in a sort of a safe location, family events, weddings, that kind of thing. And we're really seeing that as a really interesting opportunity, as some communities start to open up and allow some travel. So I think we're going to see a lot of that too.
Yeah, great. And then, so I think, we talked about this hyper-local travel that's happening. There's going to be the intrepid travelers who are probably going to be the first ones to really go beyond that domestic travel. And if we think about it, this is really the biggest change that's happened to travel since 9/11, especially if we consider air travel and, a sense of personal safety and what are your risk analysis. and the experience at airports and taxis, public transit, even just restaurants, hotels, attractions, it's all going to be really different, right? So what can destinations and businesses do to make sure that those first visitors, whether it's domestic or international, that those first visitors leave feeling satisfied despite all of those changes and concerns? Oliver, do you?
So I'm always cognizant that I'm the only male, so I don't want to go first.
I'll keep throwing to different people. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the consumer mindset before all of this happened, tourism is it's an emotional good, right? It's not it's a luxury and emotional good. So we want to be inspired. So consumers will will choose to travel to a destination or consume a tourism product because it's that level of inspiration, the emotion that's attached to it. And that's very much, left brain thinking. Right brain thinking is logical, right? It's like dollars and cents, it's health and safety. And so the aspects of health and safety that are in this mix right now will trigger consumers to either choose a destination or choose a tourism product and not. Alex, my wife and I are, looking at what are we going to do this summer? And, we happen to be in Europe and we know that Germany is opening up their borders to Denmark. So the first thing we did is where can we go rural and how are we going to find a tourism experience? So we went on Airbnb and we made that decision to choose to book because Airbnb has this policy that they're allowing us to cancel relatively last minute. And they've clearly outlined the health and safety policies. My wife and I we would classify ourselves as this intrepid traveler, not too concerned about aspects of health and safety, but we have an 8-year-old and we want to make sure that we're staying in a destination that has had proper cleaning and health and safety policies associated with it. And I think the tourism businesses and destinations that are really clear on these types of aspects, I think will be the ones that tourism consumers doing that path to purchase journey will be able to be selected. The ones that don't, I think, we're going to put them aside as consumers.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you chose us, Oliver. I think that's great. I hope you have a wonderful trip. And I think we are seeing optimistic signs, lots of demand coming in for, like I said, interesting, sort of unique travel close to home, family travel, getting in a car, going off and doing something. And I think we've been cooped up so long. I think any opportunity to try to do something like that is going to be really really appealing to people, as long as people feel like it's going to be safe and, in a good experience. And we're doing everything we can to try to respect that and honor the consumer so that, if their plans change last minute, we're trying to be able to recognize that too.
So it sounds like it's kind of like by normalizing local travel, it'll help us to normalize sort of the broader rings of travel as we go. So thinking then a little bit further ahead, the year-end holiday period is when the majority of the world travels, is when a lot of people even people who don't really travel will go a little bit further to go and see family, especially considering that people haven't had the chance to see family the way they normally would have this year. But those travelers are going to be different than the ones maybe interested in traveling right away. They're not those intrepid travelers. And they may be considering not traveling at all until a vaccine. What do you think that destinations and businesses should be doing to build relationships and trust with those people who might be worried about getting on a plane, who, but still want to see their parents, their children, their grandparents? Sarah, what do you think about that?
Well, I do think kind of what we were just talking about just a moment ago about the hygiene practices that companies or planes and hospitality companies especially are taking, but also experiences like restaurants and activities and all those providers. Like they just need to see, like on an optical level, like that there is a lot of thought and care going into it. And I think that will, definitely help bring a bit of sense of reassurance that they're making the right decision by dragging their kids halfway across to wherever to do this trip. The flip side of that, though, is that a lot of the changes that need to be implemented are going to come with a lot more time constraints. Like if you're going to be sanitizing every airplane bin at TSA in between travelers, that's going to add to your time. So people just are going to have to get ready for longer waits while these, sanitation requirements are taken care of. But I do think that is going to be the biggest thing in people's minds, at least for now. And then also financial constraints are a big issue right now with this economic crisis we're in. And some destinations try to, I think Sicily is offering some sort of subsidized vacation. Japan's doing things like that. Like destinations are trying to get creative about how they can lure travelers again, but also make it financially viable for them. And I do think since people are going to be looking at the price tag a lot more closely in the coming months, that it's going to probably help factor a lot of decisions.
Yeah, so it's really going to come down to what experience can you create plus the financial side of it.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a real focus on affordable. I totally agree with Sarah that that's something, everyone I think needs to be really aware of. The other thing is, while there are still is going to be a segment of the population that are going to be concerned about traveling, is we launched online experiences in April, which has just boomed. And it's just a way of connecting through some really cool things with other people. We have hundreds of them now, things like, how to make sangria, how to learn how to play guitar. And I actually did one with pasta with grandma in the Lombardy region of Italy. And it was amazing. I made pasta with her and we had people from all over the world making pasta together. And it was just an amazing thing. So even in the meantime, there are things we can do to connect with each other and have these amazing experiences together, which is what I think people are searching for.
Yeah. So Alex, just ad hoc question on my part is, do you think that that's something that will continue then beyond this, that those sort of online experiences, like a choice between online and in-person experiences to allow people to almost like travel without having to actually leave, even when they are able to?
I think so. I mean, this is still new and we're still sort of experimenting because we launched it in April and now we have hundreds of them. It was a very short period of time to sort of go, launch a new product on our platform. I think some of the original online experiences were real life experience hosts as well, and they converted their experience into a really great online thing. So I think we'll see a little bit of both. Some of the online ones are amazing because when you talk about affordability and not being able to, spend money to travel to Europe or doing something like that, and if you can experience cooking with an Italian grandmother by paying $50 or whatever it is to do that, that's maybe not as good as being there, but it's still a great way to experience the Italian culture.
Yeah. So I was going
to say, I haven't actually these experiences yet, but I've been really wanting to. And what I also like about the way a lot of them are actual experiences that are converted is that you can take the trip, do an experience with an Italian grandma, and then come home and do another one. I like that it's like a process that you can sort of keep reliving, even if you've already done it live.
Great.
Brittany, just back to your question about looking out to the December period. I think two deciding factors will have a huge determinant on how that unfolds. There's still a lot of questions around the second wave of the virus and how that will impact containment. The second side of it is it's resident sentiment. And our destinations, as much as the tourism boards and the local economic development departments and the governments are willing to open up with pressure from the tourism industry, it's how much are residents willing to accept back tourists. And especially if we're talking about tourism being at the hyper-local, less urban setting, destinations that don't typically accept a lot of tourism to their destination, are they willing to actually accept this? Destination Canada here in our side of the pond here, they've been really good about determining what that sentiment is going to look like by just tracking it. And by tracking it and making it available for destinations and tourism boards, it's really important that we as an industry look at that and really take it to heart when we're planning what we're going to be doing with our destinations. The second side of it is the economy. As much as we want to, as tourism marketers, promote our destinations or our tourism products, it really comes down to will our consumer have the discretionary funds in order to travel? And as this recession starts turning into even worse, a depression, are consumers going to have the discretionary funds to travel? And I think that's a big question mark right now.
Yeah. So I'm just being conscious of time. So I have one more question that I want to put out to all of you, and then we have a couple of questions that have been put into the Q&A box, as well as I think a couple that I saw snuck into the chat box. So we'll see if we can try and get to those. But my last question to each of you and is, this has been a difficult time, I think, for a lot of reasons. But I think despite all of the challenges that are coming out of this, a lot of the conversations and moments like this where things are really difficult, where you have to have uncomfortable conversations, where there's a bit of a reset, is when there's real innovation possible. This is when we can really try and rethink or reimagine what the industry can be, what it can look to in the future. So in closing, I would like each of you to quickly tell me, or tell all of us, one positive innovation that you believe will come out of the rebirth of tourism. So let's go, Sarah, let's start with you.
Well, I can't say this is quite an innovation in the sense that you might be looking for, but I don't generally consider myself a germaphobe, but when it comes to traveling, I always have, I've actually always been wiping down my seats, and I've been terrified of the airplane bin or the storage bin at TSA, and I'm scared to put my hand in the seat front pocket. So I like that there's this baseline understanding now of flight hygiene and what that might look like, and then how we're now going to have scaled up approaches to hygiene with the robot cleaning devices that are going to be deployed widely, and the touchless passport control. And I'm just really excited to see what that means for my my flight anxiety when it comes to the germ front.
Okay, interesting. So it might make it that some people are more excited to travel now that they know that it will be cleaner and less intrusive. Okay. What about you, Alex?
Well, I think it's partly what I said already about our online experiences, the idea of using Zoom, which is an amazing thing actually, to try to figure out how to bring people together and experience some things in a really creative way. So I think that's one thing, but I think a little bit related to that is really helping to inspire people who may have an interesting home somewhere that they haven't thought of sharing it yet on Airbnb in a more rural setting. Say, well, people don't want to come here, but actually they do, right? People do want to come and see interesting areas that they may not have been in, especially if they can get into a car to come and do it. And just really encouraging people to think about how that can really help your own personal economics too. If you have a bunkie at I'm in a cabin right now, the bunkie next door, it's like people could come and stay there and experience what it's like to be on a lake. And I just think there's a lot of opportunity for people to enter this world by sharing some space that they may already have.
Okay, and then Oliver, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a wrench. So one of the—
I was prepared for that question.
Have you given a wrench? Thrown a wrench?
No. I was prepared for this question that you asked before, but please go ahead.
No. Well, okay. I'm gonna throw this little wrench. You can choose to take it or not. You can grab it or you can swat it away. So same question, but in the chat we had someone who is, let's say calling us out a little. So Ross said, I'm afraid that we're exploring the short-term impacts and possible solutions within 12 months, given no second wave to the cost to the economy. Now will rear its worst in 2021, many future bankruptcies and job loss. So same question about what are you excited about in terms of innovation for the future or the rebirth of tourism, given more of a long-term lens?
Yeah, awesome. Pretty awesome question. As an industry, I think we were pretty slow off the mark, really understanding the impact of this. Then, February started hitting and forward bookings just evaporated. And this is a massive, monumental shock to our industry, and especially SMEs. And, for a number of your folks that are on the phone, it's gut-wrenching. People are seeing their livelihoods or their businesses just being destroyed. I think the one innovation that will come out of this is us as an industry for, honestly, the last 50 plus years, we have always been KPI'd on absolute growth. The number of arrivals to our destinations, the number of arrivals to our hotels, the number of increasing flights or frequencies that we can put in our airlines, and et cetera. It's always been about absolute growth. And, last year in 2019, it really came to head in a number of destinations around the concept of over-tourism. I think now the one innovation we're going to get out of this, and it's going to be a little bit longer term, but it's us rethinking the industry that we want for our destinations. We want higher wealth generation for small businesses and local communities. We want our staff to be paid living wages. We want tourism to be the industry we all dream about, but have not necessarily had because we've been chasing that absolute growth dream. I think we can reassess our industry in terms of how it really contributes to our local communities, in terms of not just, you know, the interaction with the visitor experience and not just the wealth generation aspect, but are we really creating places and spaces for residents as well as the consumers? And if we can think of that as an industry, I think we're going to be winners in 2024. We're going to have a reinvented industry that's contributing more to the bottom line in terms of, you know, the emotional aspects and the hard aspects around costs and wealth generation.
Okay, thank you all three of you for all of that and for your great answers. So I've got a couple of Q&A questions. I think we have, we're running a little bit long, so I'm gonna probably pick maybe two of them, but what we'll do is I will share all of these questions as well, so that way maybe we can get some of the answers, we can send them in an email afterwards, or I also will put you on the spot at the end to kind of share ways that people can get in touch with you. But couple of questions. So one of them is, all right. All right, well, let's do this one. So you started to bring it up, Oliver, but many cities and countries are unhappy with the influx of Airbnb tourists in particular. So in addition to the purchasing and removal of many types of living accommodations for residents in these cities, what is Airbnb doing about this? So I will put that forward, but maybe reframe it in a little way of part of our conversation here, so it's not a political thing, is, you know, you were talking about this idea of moving people into these kind of more rural spaces, because that's the type of tourism that people are looking for in this short term. You know, what are some ways that, Alex, you and your team are looking at navigating that conversation about bringing more Airbnb listings onto a market or into a market that maybe didn't have a lot of that previously?
Sorry, I'm not quite following you. Is that for Oliver to answer first?
No, for you. Sorry.
Well, you know, that kind of conversation is something we've been having for, you know, a long period of time. It's not new. We work really hard to be good neighbors and good citizens, and we partnered with cities for years now, trying to figure out what's the right solution, you know, in Barcelona, what's the right solution in Iceland in the summer, you know, the other big hotspots. I think this conversation is going to change because travel is going to change, and I think, you know, a lot of communities have become very dependent on the economic dollars brought in by tourism. It's super important for good paying jobs and for all kinds of, you know, all kinds of things. In 2019, our 30 largest markets, the direct economic impact from Airbnb was $117 billion. That's a lot of value going into communities. So I just think it's a refocus for us on what we call our core hosts, which are people sharing their primary residence, or perhaps it's a secondary residence, people who are very connected to their property and to their community and wanting to share it in, you know, in with all the kind of safety standards and everything else that we're talking about now. That's the kind of thing I think we're going to be focusing on.
Great, thank you. All right, and then quickly, last one is for Sarah. So I'd like to know, or I'm going to pose this to you, is what do you see as the future of leisure tourism? The things like cruises, cultural events, things like that. More, yeah.
Well, especially with cruises, people love cruises, don't they? So I don't think that industry, people are raring to get back on them as soon as they do. But I think across the board, no matter what sector we're talking, it really comes down to what sort of innovations they're going to be making as far as hygiene and social distancing. at least for the short term. I do think public memory is pretty short, and once we hopefully have a handle on things, things will start to go back to normal. But you know, I've been reading a lot lately about cruising, about the kinds of new technology they're doing where you can, you know, like endlessly open doors and order things without menus. And I think a lot of that kind of technology is going to be really important to make sure to kind of instill that confidence in people going back. And that'll apply across the board with a lot of the different aspects of the tourism industry.
Great. Oliver, I think you stuck your fingers up.
Just quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I think trust is key. Trust has always been key. I think it's even more key right now. And this is related to resident sentiment, specifically with cruising. The cruise companies are going to have to really demonstrate that they can rebuild consumer trust, but more importantly, the resident trust. And this goes back to trying to change the model of the value chain around cruising. We might get high volume with cruises, but really what are they contributing to the bottom line of destinations? I think the destinations that look at this aspect and try to determine, you know, a new way or a new model with cruising, I think will come out as winners in here. But the old way of just, you know, having these mega cruise ships show up at a destination, disgorge thousands of people, really doesn't serve residents, and it really doesn't serve the destinations. It serves the cruise companies.
Okay, thank you all of you. This has been really super exciting, super engaging, and I love some of these answers and really the way that we're thinking about how do we move ourselves forward. And we have another panel to get to, so I'm super excited about that too. But quickly, before we go, I know that we had more questions and we were able to answer. And I would love to be able to, you know, obviously in a respectful manner, allow people to continue to ask questions to the three of you if you're comfortable with it. So quickly, what is the one best social way for people to get in touch with you, and what is that handle? Sarah, let's go with you.
I actually make it really easy. My handle everywhere is by Sarah Khan, so it's BYSARAHKHAN, my byline, and that's on Twitter, Instagram. My website is bysarahkhan.com. Anywhere you want to find me, that's probably how I will be.
So all the ways. Perfect. All right, Alex, what about you?
Yeah, for me, probably on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me there. I think that's the
Okay, perfect. All right, and then Oliver, what about you?
So I'm not that organized. So it's probably my email. It's oliverm@2031.org. oliverm@2031.org.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you to the three of you. It's been really great. And yeah, everybody, please find ways to get in touch with them if you do have additional questions. And now I'm going